Good morning, everyone, and welcome to day 2 of our CRRA conference, the 45th annual and the longest layover ever. I hope you all had a wonderful, wonderful first day yesterday. There were so many exciting things to listen to, from our plenary speakers to the sessions. I know the ones that I attended were jam-packed. I think SB 1383 is on everybody's minds with it just around the corner. As we get ready to start the day off today, I just wanted to give you a little bit of stats about how many attendees we have this year for our conference. We have over 635 registrants for the full conference. We had over 530 active attendees yesterday throughout the various sessions. So that is phenomenal. Hands off to you guys. We know it's been a really tough year and a half. And to have so many of you stay engaged and involved and be willing to spend 4 days with your computer and us means the world to us. So thank you again. We've got a lot of wonderful, wonderful things planned for the rest of the day and the rest of the conference, but hopefully you're not just listening in to the sessions, you're joining us for the fun activities like the trash monologues. There was a lot of great stories. So keep those in mind for next year and bring them to us, hopefully when we're back in person. And then Tracy will go over these in more detail, but we have the members meeting this afternoon, as well as the NCRRA players. I can't wait to see what they've got planned for our entertainment tonight. So please be sure to join us for all the fun. With that, I am going to introduce our first speaker, Jared Blumenfeld. Jared is California's Secretary for Environmental Protection, appointed by Governor Gavin Newsom in January. He is one of America's most innovative environmental leaders with more than 25 years of environmental policy and management experience at the local, national, and international levels. From 2009 to 2016, he served under former President Barack Obama as Regional Administration of the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency for the Pacific Southwest region. From 2001 to 2009, he was director of San Francisco's Department of Environment, where he worked with then Mayor Newsom to make San Francisco the most sustainable city in the nation. Prior to government service, Jared led international campaigns for non-governmental organizations, including the International Fund for Animal Welfare and the Natural Resource Defense Council. A graduate of the Cambridge College of Arts and Technology, he holds law degrees from the University of London and the University of California, Berkeley School of Law. Prior to joining the Newsom administration, Jared founded a private consulting firm to advise clean tech companies on strategic planning and market development. He also hiked the Pacific Coast Trail, a 2,605-mile route that stretches from Mexico to Canada, and started an award-winning podcast on environmental topics. Wow, that's amazing. So with that, I am going to turn it over to you, Jared.
Thanks, Monica. And really good to be with everyone, and just glad that you just going 45 years on is a huge accomplishment. And just thinking about the year ahead, jumping straight in, I mean, we have all dealt with innumerable personal and professional emergencies and crises. You know, we think of COVID, but in the right now we're in the middle of a wild emergency. We have a drought. You know, our schools are in their second reopening. I mean, this is a time of huge transition, and so well, it's tempting to kind of get into talking about any of the individual things like 1383 or how we're dealing with convenience or those. We need to be at a higher level, right, as a community, and this is really going to be a challenge to all of us to think differently in the year ahead, months ahead. We as a community, I think, partly because of a huge benefit, which is we're tied to and communities and businesses reduce, reuse, and recycle. But at some level, we need to bring all together. And that, I think this forum in particular is important. This is about California. And I have to say, I was pretty pissed that Maine got to get comprehensive EPR before California did. British Columbia has done it. You know, Washington State. We are. I feel like we're catching up to, and that's going to require one of us to take action. When it comes to the climate crisis, whether it's our goals of getting to 100% renewable energy or the governor's executive order on getting rid of internal combustion engines for sale by 2035 and only having zero emission vehicles, or the low carbon fuels, or you list it, the world. And I was thinking before this opportunity to talk with each of you why that is to the that we need it when it comes to management and the issues, the huge issues that we have around reducing but increasing the amount of disposable single-use plastics in our society, not reducing but increasing the amount of plastic crap that goes into our ocean every day. So, and you know, as we look at moving away from transportation fuels, we see big oil trying to take up the space of building more and more capacity to build plastic around the world. So I think our challenge is how we come together and work out what we agree on. We're really good at describing our niche. And I remember starting in San Francisco, when we started, we were just doing things like, how do you curbside of food? And now, you know, you have to have graduated with a degree and understand the special exact sense of compost, which is great. And now it's not general, it's for family. And, you know, the specialization that we have, there are people, you know, many of us who were generalists, but a lot of us have a very specialized knowledge, and that's incredibly important. But at this time, especially as I see kind of political opportunity as we have initiatives for 2022, come hell or water, if that ends up being thing that we need to push for, we need to make sure that passes. So that is incredibly important. That also offers us a window to think about if there are legislative solutions. And frankly, we've kind of, over the years, nickel and dimed ourselves. We've done little things, but when it comes to doing the big things, we shy away from them. People feel like the system is working when I feel anyone who looks objectively is not. What I love to do in months ahead is really work out what is it that we want to push, and how do we make sure. I have to say my bias is towards making sure that the people that produce all this material, the manufacturers, have responsibility for both reducing and the life of product, and think how we can get there quickly as a group. Maybe this is a facilitated discussion that you will with. I am incredibly bullish on our opportunity to capture the public imagination, to move these issues forward, and to hold companies responsible. But just from the very myopic view, which I've never had before, but just to give you a sense of sitting in Sacramento, it feels like a very fractured community. You all feel like a very fractured community. You feel like people are coming saying, these are the two things we need. More, B3 is broken, we don't have money, it's too full. We're in emergency, people. And part of that emergency is the materials that are produced from their mining impacts, all the way through their transportation impacts, all the way through their end of use. We are swimming in a sea of plastic and other kind of junk that we need to get out of, and the public is on our side. So the opportunity, unlike complicated issues about how we deal with climate, everyone understands what this looked like. Everyone understands that we should have zero waste, that we should waste less in material time, and yet we really need to get to that next level together. So what I would love to initiate with all of you now is that process. Like, what are the big things that everyone, not what we can't agree on, there's a lot in that bucket, but what can we agree on, and how do we align those forces to get the systemic change that we want? If you compare it, I'm going to compare it back to the executive order that the governor came out on zero emission vehicles. GM, Mercedes, the UK, no one had set an audacious goal of getting to 2035. No one. And people thought we were a little bit crazy to get. All those people mentioned have targets that either meet or beat California's. And so our leadership is often taken for granted, particularly areas like we aren't currently where I would be. And I'm looking at each of you in this community to think about and support each other to get, because if we can't help recycling in California, the likelihood of being able to completely transform our planet away from fossil fuels seems almost foolhardy. I mean, if we can't do this in the world's 5th largest economy with Democratic supermajorities in both houses of our legislature and a governor that cares deeply about recycling and a community that we all have, what chance do we have to do the really, really difficult things when it comes to moving away from fossil fuels? So that's the challenge I really think we need to focus on. And yes, each of our communities is struggling. And yes, there's a lot of complexity to the laws on the books. To set our eyes a little further into the distance, we need to make sure that we have strategies for getting money. We no longer afford a system where local governments and individuals are paying price. We need to put the responsibility on the polluters. And I'm ready to do it. We have a great leadership you had yesterday. CRRA Recycle. We got huge amount of energy and focus on this. We cannot do this alone. And you coming to us and saying, this is what we want to do, this is lined up in the legislature, this is what we'll do, and it's big and bold and changes not only California, but the planet. That's what California needs to be known for. That's what I'm excited to work with each of you on. And so it's from a fragmented universe to one where we know what we're doing, we know that we have each other's back. We're not all competing for limited resources, but making the pot bigger so that we can all do what we need to do, from reuse to reduction, to making sure that what we do recycling wise actually creates the jobs of the future. So I'm incredibly bullish on this. I don't want to come across as just complaining. This isn't a complaint. This is a request for each of your leadership to come together. We've been so isolated through COVID, and that isolation often leads us to just focusing on what's in front of us. What's in front of us now is really, if for those of you who had the unfortunate pleasure of reading the IPCC report, the International Panel on Climate Change, the very fate of the planet is in the balance. And that is not hyperbole. That is where we're going. And so we need to include, I don't hear this debate when I hear the president talking about climate change. I'm not hearing this debate about all the materials that are used in the production, manufacturing, distribution, transportation and sale and end of use products. It's huge. You will do that. So we need to make sure we're ready. We need to make sure California, and we need to make sure each of your leadership is heard. And Heidi and that is cool that are the Recycling Commission. They've done an amazing job. But I think, as you'd hear from Heidi if she was right now, they come out with all the great ideas, but unless we lay the foundation in the legislature, in businesses, in each of our local governments, so that those ideas can take root and be implemented quickly and have the funding needed, they're just going to fall off ears. So this is the year it's done. and I'm serious about this, we have to focus on what we can and big together. And you will have both my support at every step of the way and any that I can. That's it. Drop. I don't have normally do have a podcast. Thank you, Monica.
Yeah, and actually, Jared, if I can have you stay on for a few minutes.
I'm not going anywhere, Monica. I'm here.
Great. We do have some questions for you if we can take a couple of minutes to do so. The first one is from Ted Ward. What can be done to reduce or remove subsidies for resource extraction and or giving supports of similar magnitude for recovery industries? The playing field is not level.
Yeah, we often talk about like removing fossil fuel subsidies. We think of as extraction, but what we're not thinking of, Ted, to your important, is where those resources are going. So we're subsidizing all kinds of industries, extractive industries that then make virgin materials that we then, as consumers and government, have to pay to deal with. And so, love the idea. Like that's a whole area that I think we have opportunity right now to think through, which is what are those connections between environmental justice and equity and resource extraction, and, for instance, manufacturing of plastics, and how do we as a community support remove subsidies where they exist and inject ourselves into that debate. Really important, and I love the question. So anything I can do to help on that, let me know, Ted.
Great, thank you. Let me get to the next question. This is from Colleen Foster. It's agreed that significant and momentous action and courage is needed, but speaking of disingenuity, isn't it disingenuous to pass regulation without funding or to pass downstream?
I mean, disingenuous means that you're talking out of two sides of your mouth. I think it's complicated. I don't think it's disingenuous. You know, we need to that we move society, and we have levers to do that. And how those costs are accrued, not be at local government, but it should be the polluter. The reason the polluter pays principle is that we make sure the people that are causing the problem clean it up. And so how we restructure so that the appropriate people is key. And we're struggling, I think, as a state. Until we take the big, bold initiative, we're not going to be able to, and we've been reticent. And largely it's because those interests are incredibly powerful, that we are, this is not, this is an easy fight. It hasn't been an easy fight, but we're not going to win it unless we do it together. So yes, you need the money. There's lots of different ways. The ballot initiative puts a 1 cent fee on every piece of plastic. Will raise about $4 billion. So there's different ways of achieving those funding streams. And we need to make sure that we always think about funding while we think about those mandates. So I don't think it's disingenuous, but it is something that ought to be.
Thank you. From Tim Goncharoff, the compromise inherent in the political process means that change is happening far too slowly. How can we accelerate the needed changes?
I think, Tim, there are people who just recently retired from county government in Santa Cruz, and they got a lot of energy and time. For those of you who don't know Tim is that person. So Tim, we're looking for to bottle your energy. I love your energy. I think each of us has to take more responsibility and own some of it at a statewide level that we're currently doing at county or local level. Think about how we bring ourselves together to move those issues forward. And Tim, like, leadership would be incredibly welcome in this area. So, you've got all the experience many of you do on this call of having worked at the grassroots level at the city or county level, and that's what we need. We need to bring those resources together, bring that human capital together, and get this done.
Great, thank you. With all these zero emission vehicles, what happens to all the car batteries after the vehicles are no longer functionable? Is there consideration for recycling programs or extraction impacts?
Yeah, so right now, actually, the Cal EPA hosts the Lithium-Ion battery task force, and we're looking at this exact issue. For those of you who are managing to multitask, you could be on both. I'd suggest one or the other. But yes, we have a whole process for looking at that. And for instance, you know, those Tesla walls or the energy storage systems, those can all be made out of recycled car batteries, because car batteries need a very high capacity level, and those battery storage systems don't. Whole ability to switch the use. We need more and more battery storage. So that's one opportunity, but there's a lot that can be done. And for those of you who are interested, we can put something hopefully in the chat later about the lithium-ion task force. But great question.
Great, that's great to hear. We've got time for 2 more questions. So the last 2 are, what can you and or the governor do to push EPR?
Great question. I mean, partly it's saying that we're in favor of it, which we have. If you read the budget documents every year, we've talked about the importance of achieving extended producer responsibility, or producer responsibility without it being did. So we are championing it, work with anyone that has a comprehensive solution. There's so much that we've already done, from paint to mattresses to thermometers around extended producer responsibility, but we really haven't tackled the behemoths. So yeah, we are here. The governor is, I think, probably the most knowledgeable person ever to occupy the governor's office on the issues of recycling. When we worked together in San Francisco, this was, you know, we did everything from requirement for zero waste, composting, recycling mandatory, to doing construction and demolition debris ordinances. So he's very familiar with what needs to be done. And we literally, you guys come to Sacramento with an idea and legislators that want to get it done, and we're going to work with you and roll up our sleeves to get it done.
Great, thank you. And one final question. Going one step further, can we stop all new oil leases in California?
So yeah, the governor on that front, I think, is the first, you know, California is the 5th largest in the world, and the governor came out and said, we need to set a date to end oil extraction. I don't think anyone else has done that. And he asked that the Air Resources Board and the scoping plan, which are in the middle of doing, map out no later than 2045 as the end date to oil extraction in the state, but as soon as 2035. Obviously, the key, as everyone knows, not just ending extraction, ending demand. And that's what we're really engaged in here, is the reduction, reuse, and recycling is an opportunity to significantly bring down demand of fossil fuels. And that narrative and story, I think, is incredibly important, because we don't want to just build capacity for virgin plastic manufacturing and oil extraction in California and have crude or refined oil come in from Saudi Arabia or Venezuela to make more plastic. We need to end the need, demand, and production of plastic, period.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jared. We really appreciate you taking time out of your extremely busy schedule to join us.
Yeah, I love this stuff. And I'm here, I'm literally like, phone me, and if you guys, CRRA wants to host a convening like next week, I'm here. All our staff will be here. We're here to support you, and we need your support. So really, really follow up and engage at a serious level about getting this shit done.
I'm sure we will be reaching out quite frequently as we move forward. So thank you again.
Thank you. Good luck with your day.
You too. Wonderful.
And anyone who is really pushing like to get this stuff done quickly, hopefully the questions can be like, we have to get this done quickly. We have no choice.
Absolutely. Thank you. And if there was a way to drop the mic, this would be it. With that, thank you again, Jared. I'm going to invite my conference co-chair, Kobe Sky, to come on up. Jared, you can go ahead and turn off your mic and camera. Hey, Kobe, go ahead and turn on your mic. So with that, good morning. I am going to drop off and turn this over to Kobe.
Thank you so much, Monica. And I'm just so thrilled to see about 300 of you joining us virtually. We had mixed feelings, of course, about going virtual again, but I can see just from the energy in the room, the great questions that we got from Jared, and the engagement from all of you that this conference has exceeded all of our expectations. I really want to thank Monica for kicking off the conference today. She's been an incredible co-chair, and I want to thank the staff and all of the volunteers that have helped to make the conference so successful. It also gives me great pleasure to introduce our next speaker, who's April Jean. April is a racial justice trainer, consultant, community organizer, and systems change strategist whose 18-year career is focused on illuminating the impacts of race and racism on systems, institutions, organizations, communities, and individuals, with a specific focus on mitigating disparate outcomes for individuals who identify as Black or African American. And this is such a timely topic, such an important time to have April talk to us. In her training and consulting, and she's been a great consultant for CRRA, she examines the impacts of race in systemic outcomes to promote liberation and justice for historically marginalized and disenfranchised communities. Her specific niche is in training organizational competency, responsiveness, equity, racial justice, and systems thinking approaches. We certainly need a lot more of that. And Ms. Jean is also the owner of Pure Genius Consulting and co-founder of Racial Justice Advocates, a newly formed woman-led consulting effort focused on reimagining a comprehensive systems approach to improve outcomes for communities of color in the Sacramento and beyond. So April, I'm so glad to have you on. I understand we're going to have a short video, and then you're going to talk to us more about the work you're doing for CRRA and how we can all be better at this really important topic. So thank you for joining us today.
Good morning, everyone. My name is April Jean, founder and principal consultant of Racial Justice Advocates. First, I would like to thank Tracy Onstadt-Bills and the CRRA team for inviting me to speak at this year's conference. My team and I have been working very closely with Tracy and her team over the last few months, and it has been a pleasure getting to know each of you. Before we get started in today's presentation, I want to take a moment to center our ancestors. It is critical that we acknowledge and reflect upon the history and present manifestations of colonization, coercion, and genocide that plague this nation. Here in the Sacramento region, we're living on stolen land from the Patwin, Miwok, and Southern Maidu First Nations. Nationally, we live in a country that brutally extracted labor, energy, intellectual property, and brilliance from people of African descent for over 400 years. Take a moment to reflect upon this. Ground yourself in walking out of this presentation and conference with a deeper understanding of your personal work along the racial justice continuum. Understand the significance of our history, our present, and our future, and how it shapes the work that we do today. Today, we celebrate the resilience and greatness of Indigenous, Black people from all over the world. Please join me in a brief moment of reflection, and let's all take a moment to center ourselves in this history, which fuels our collective work and guides our intention for today and beyond. Thank you. So let's talk briefly about the reckoning that was. Dr. Martin Luther King said, "An injustice anywhere is a threat to freedom everywhere." This still holds true today. As I was preparing my speech, I thought intensely about what would be my topic of discussion. I considered who I would be speaking to and how I could mobilize a room a virtual room of people on the topic of racial justice. As I pondered this, I determined that I didn't want to waste your time talking topically about the issue of racism specifically. Instead, I decided to talk candidly about where we are in our movement and how we can collectively move from awareness to action. Nearly a year ago, we all witnessed a historical pattern of racial injustice playing out in real time as George Floyd cried out for his mother as he took his last breath under a police officer's knee. George Floyd is still everywhere. Black mothers, myself included, we see him in our sons, our daughters, and even our unborn children. The killings of Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, and countless others led to a racial reckoning in this country. But was it truly a reckoning? The racial reckoning that supposedly happened in 2020, the year of the movement for Black Lives, global protest, and the insurrection at the National Capitol, and the COVID-19 pandemic, it seems wise to take a minute to carefully examine a word that has been thrown around like popcorn, as if we can talk racial reckoning into existence. Truth is, a reckoning is not an item on a wish list. It's a tangible thing, an accomplishment. A reckoning, by definition, refers to the moment when we finally deal with an ugly situation. And our ugly situation in this country is racism. It's more than just having an awareness and admitting that there's a problem. It is a word measured by our actions. As you're listening to this presentation, I ask you to all consider the overuse and even misuse of this word. I myself have been guilty of this. Over the past year, the word reckoning has been used in many spaces that I'm in. But none of us should leave this presentation under the assumption that we've had a true reckoning in this country. Across the country, as the movement for Black lives intensified, Confederate statues fell, historical racist figureheads retired, and Juneteenth became a paid federal holiday. Additionally, books about race and anti-racism burned up the bestsellers list. This was a year when government, philanthropy, corporations, campuses, and nonprofit organizations were forced to explain why their records on diversity and equity were so often at odds with their aspirations. It's true. We've seen powerful demonstrations of progress that are more than just symbolic. Opinions on racial justice, diversity, and inclusion have shifted dramatically. In a poll released in July 2020, shortly after George Floyd's death, almost 80% of Americans said that racial and ethnic discrimination was a big problem. That's an almost 30% increase from 2020, the same year that 25-year-old Freddie Gray died in police custody in Baltimore. Attitudes about policing and other issues have changed too. A poll in 2020 found that 57% of Americans said the police officers were more likely to use excessive force towards Black people. But it took a particularly heinous act of police brutality, an officer kneeling on a man's neck for almost 9 minutes, 9 minutes, to convince most Americans that racism is a problem and a daily reality for many. Did that happen partly because we're in a period with no concerts, no jobs, no vacations, sports, travel, no dining out? Because the world was shut in and the majority had to watch what happened in Minneapolis and absorb the full breadth of the aftermath with no distractions? I think so. As the world slowed down, it was like traveling below the speed limit on life's highway. The landscape was no longer a blur. You could no longer turn a blind eye to the inequities that many people of color and other marginalized groups experience every day. The travesties were live and direct on our screens, and this became our window to the world. For example, you couldn't track the COVID-19 virus without also seeing the ways it claimed a disproportionate number of Black and brown lives. Stuck at home during the day, you saw who delivered your packages and your takeout. And when or if you did venture out, you noticed who clocked in during the lockdown. Our farm workers, our grocery store workers, our garbage collectors, the hospital aides, who cleared bedpans and changed sheets, We watched all of this with fewer life distractions. But here's a question for each of you. When we finally move past the pandemic and life returns to its normal rhythms, will those epiphanies last? Will your awareness still be heightened? How will you measure progress? Will people do more than just acknowledge the scourge of racism? Will organizations move beyond anecdotal support and racial equity statements? Will they commit to the much more complex work of erasing it? I want you to take a moment to sit with that question. Understand this. Awareness is not the same thing as a reckoning. We can't increase racial equity without eradicating white supremacy. We cannot fix anti-Black and anti-Black/brown racism that underpins policies, decisions that drive hiring, prison rates, Wi-Fi access, education, and the accumulation of wealth. People get uncomfortable or defensive when they hear phrases such as white privilege and white supremacy. However, it is clear that there has been an innate value placed on white life in this country since the formation, and deconstructing the depth of that history will require much more than a year of so-called reckoning. It requires a complete reboot and a commitment to let go of the things which people cling to consciously or subconsciously, because going through life with advantages has its perks. Creating a new society that centers racial justice and sharing power with people who are seen as different is something we cannot just will into existence. We can't legislate it. We can't even quickly get people to admit to real historical or unconscious bias. So let's not tell ourselves that 1 year of discovery is going to get us there. As James Baldwin once said, people can cry much easier than they can change. Let that marinate for a sec. As we head out of 2021, some will proclaim that 2020 as a year of racial reckoning. I get it. I understand. The phrase carries weight. It sounds important. But we cannot convince ourselves into thinking that progress made this year deserves a victory lap or that we should give ourselves a pat on the back. The race towards racial equity and justice isn't over. In fact, it's barely begun. We're just getting started. And that is because systemic racism is entrenched in our nation's history, culture, mindset, policies, practices of our systems, for-profits, nonprofits, community-based organizations. And across these systems, the constructs of racism and white supremacy have grossly affected outcomes for Black, Indigenous, and other people of color. These systems were historically designed not only to harm and oppress, but to disable people of color from having the choice of self-sufficiency. Therefore, it's imperative for system and organizational leaders to advocate for and adopt strategies that incorporate racial justice, equity, and cultural responsiveness to address the persistent social and structural disadvantages and predictable adverse outcomes experienced by people of color and other marginalized groups. In addition to this, I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge the urgency of this conversation and the need for our leaders, both locally and nationally, to truly take a stand for racial justice by creating culturally responsive and racially equitable environments in their organizations where all people have an equitable opportunity at success. Black, Indigenous, and people of color are facing challenges in this country that traditional approaches will not resolve and have never resolved. Traditional approaches to hiring, resource allocation, service delivery, and community engagement continue to perpetuate negative outcomes for these communities. Currently, our communities are demanding that we lean in, that we create more intentional and equitable approach where the experiences of all people are valued and where their lives are respected and their contributions are encouraged, not dismissed, stifled, or controlled by those in power. This is why I'm extremely glad to be working with CRRA. As one of the oldest, largest nonprofit recycling organizations in the United States, they have committed to tackling the issue of racial equity, inclusion, and cultural responsiveness within their organization. By launching a racial and cultural equity initiative, they have committed not to just examining racial and cultural equity within their organization, but also as an industry leader. CRRA is exploring its role in the movement for racial equity and how it aims to identify strategies to systemically address equity, diversity in its work and the recycling industry at large. Over the course of the next 6 months, CRRA has committed to the following activities. 1, deploying and collecting responses to a digital survey to examine CRRA's baseline of knowledge and most significant capacity building needs on topics related to diversity, inclusion, racial equity, and cultural responsiveness. Step 2, CRRA will also be participating in virtual capacity building opportunities that will include research and activities related to anti-racism, racial equity, social justice, just to name a few. These capacity building opportunities aim to support CRRA with establishing common language, normalizing conversations that support CRRA in building a baseline of knowledge to promote and normalize race, equity, and cultural responsiveness within the organization. We'll also support them in building a firm foundation that helps to create an inclusive organizational culture that reduces disparities and advances positive outcomes for Black, Indigenous, and people of color, and other marginalized groups. And lastly, the Racial Justice Advocates team will assist CRRA with developing and designing a multi-year strategy to support them in implementing and sustaining its efforts and engaging partners, community members through webinars, speaking engagements, events, and collaborative learning opportunities. Needless to say, this is a lot of work, but this is important work, and I'm really proud to be working with CRRA on this project. In July, CRRA launched its first racial and cultural equity survey. The goal of this survey was to gather preliminary information about CRRA's starting place. Those who participated in the survey were advisors, board members, technical counsel, and staff. Over 70% of the survey respondents identified as white or Caucasian, which speaks specifically to a glaring statistic on who holds power and decision-making authority within the organization. 53% of the respondents identified as women, and 47% of the respondents identified as men. In reviewing the survey, one respondent mentioned, "It is important to be intentional and explicit about how racial equity impacts all aspects of CRRA programming, planning, policy, and decision-making in order to provide access for all, especially underrepresented audiences and members not traditionally reached or served by CRRA." This is spot on. When asked what's propelling your interest in operationalizing racial equity and cultural responsiveness within the organization, 55% of the respondents express a desire for a more diverse group and inclusivity for all within the organization. 37% of the respondents believe that this is the right thing to do, and 8% of the respondents believe now is the time for change. This data speaks to a shared agreement that increasing the diversity and inclusivity in membership and across the organization as a whole is an important value to CRRA. Another key question that was asked was, are you clear about CRRA's vision and goals to advance racial and cultural equity within the organization? 33% of the respondents indicated that they would like a greater understanding of issues related to racial equity and the tools available to support their work, and how we as an organization can evolve. 24% of the respondents expressed a desire to be anti-racist. 21% of the respondents would like a voice in the process, and 10% of the respondents would like to become more aware and learn best in new practices. As CRRA continues to move forward with the process, the organization will need to create a mechanism for communicating and sharing its progress, both internally and externally, as well as opening up its educational opportunities to its membership. There will be more info on this survey that will be available later in September. So please be looking out for this. But these are just some initial steps that CRRA is taking. And again, I'm really proud to be a part of this work. So at this point in the presentation, hopefully you're thinking deeply about everything that we've discussed, and thinking deeply about where your company or organization is on matters pertaining to racial equity. Some of you may not know exactly where to start, or even where your organization is, and the path that your organization will take on the journey towards beginning its racial equity work. As discussed earlier in the presentation, due to our current social climate, many organizations have expressed interest, but don't know where to start. Even in the absence of a clearly defined path, there are actionable steps that your organization can take right now. And these steps include: number 1, name racial equity as a moral and strategic imperative for your company or organization. Make sure that equity and responsiveness is at the center of everything that you do. Hold racial equity as a North Star for your company. Define and communicate how racial equity helps your company achieve its mission. And the more you connect the reasons for doing this to your mission and vision, organizational values and strategies, the more critically important it will feel to everyone at every level. Number 2, establish a shared vocabulary. I'm really big on the idea that words matter. Words in their multiple uses reflect on the tremendous diversity that characterizes our society. In the context of racial equity work, misunderstanding about words during discussions on race often lead to confusion, which can also lead to conflict and controversy. So shared vocabulary is essential to achieving some degree of a shared understanding and collective visioning. Use this as a starting point. This is a great way to begin to establish conversations on racial equity. Please reach out to me if you would like to learn more about additional tools and support in developing your vocabulary. I'll have my information available at the end of the presentation. Number 3, open a continuous dialogue about racial equity and cultural responsiveness within your company or organization. There are numerous ways to engage in effective conversations on racial equity. You can host brown bag lunches, embed racial equity and cultural responsiveness into all meetings as an agenda item. This ensures that these conversations remain at the forefront of your work. Consider identifying an outside facilitator to ensure discussions are safely and effectively supported. Also, as you're beginning or continuing these conversations, make sure that you implement community or group agreements. This ensures that there are rules for engagement, and it ensures that people within your organizations feel validated and feel heard and feel safe to engage in sensitive conversations. Number 4, commit to ongoing capacity building. As I've mentioned before, those who identify as leaders within our organizations set the tone for their organizations. Participating in ongoing educational opportunities communicates your commitment to the work of growth and ongoing learning on the racial justice continuum. This is essential as a leader within your organization who is taking on racial equity work. You have to have the skills and the knowledge and the competencies and the capacity to have dialogue to lead this work in an effective and constructive way. So commit to ongoing capacity building. And number 5, start with the data. It's not by happenstance that I shared some data points about CRRA's survey. It's important to lead with the data because that helps us discover where we're going. Data tells a story, and as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, negative outcomes for community colors can be identified across all systems. Now, by disaggregating data by race and ethnicity, this can help inform programmatic and policy changes. Organizations and companies should always examine engagement and retention of staff at all levels and use that data to inform hiring, use that data to inform engagement or shifts that need to be made in your processes. Hold yourself accountable for this work. Deeply reviewing data also ensures that your company or organization remains accountable to the communities and the populations that you are serving and employ. As I wrap up this presentation, I want each of you to know that the real challenge for companies and organizations is not figuring out what we can do, but rather, are you willing to do it? This work is not hard or not easy, and it doesn't happen through a wait and see approach. It does not happen by people working harder. Conceptualizing the task of taking on systems and eradicating racism is hard and exhausting work, especially for Black, Indigenous, and people of color who have been fighting for racial equality for centuries. In order to tackle this issue, it requires us to be intentionally focused on action. Action is required of a multiracial, multi-generational coalition of people working to reimagine a society that does not exist yet. We have to create it. This work is just one piece of the broader puzzle of racial justice. It's not a sprint. It's not a marathon. It's a relay race. This is legacy work, work that will span far beyond our tenures. All of these things collectively move beyond performative statements of support, and so it is time we do the work. Once we all collectively commit to this, only then will we truly have a racial reckoning in America. And that concludes my presentation for today. I thank you all very much. I wish I could see all of you in the room. I thank you so much for spending this time with me this morning, and I look forward to answering your questions in the Q&A. If you have any questions about any of the content that I shared today, please screenshot this page. My email is april@rjadvocates916.com, and you can also visit our website at www.rjadvocates916.com. Again, thank you very much to the CRRA team, and I look forward to speaking with you all in the Q&A. Thank you very much.
April, Kobe is going to do the Q&A, but I just want to hop on because there's been some really incredible conversation in the chat. And I just wanted to, first off, say thank you for all of your efforts this last year. And I wanted to let the CRRA membership know that while it's been one of our focal points and goals this last year to engage April and be able to put a plan together, it's been conversation for at least the last 10, 15 years that I've been on the board. And the primary purposes of what we're trying to accomplish here, and as you mentioned, it's a legacy. This is not something we're just doing this year and stopping. This is something that's going to be in the CRRA budget to be able to stay engaged and make change over the many, many years to come. But the primary purpose is to be inclusive in the organization, and it's not just about people of color, it's cultural views and religion and people with differing views. So our group is very passionate about pretty much everything, which is fantastic. You could see that in the chat box. And so for CRRA, the board really wants to engage, make change. As everyone knows, we're an educational organization. And so not only are we trying to make change for our organization as a whole, we're also trying to provide tools and training for our members so that we can continually grow together and change our industry as a whole. So I just wanted to mention that, why that's such an important mission vision for us right now and moving forward. I wanted to thank you so much for your words. It is very difficult discussion for many of us because we haven't been a part of this. I'm a white woman, right? And so I'm thrilled to be a part of our diversity committee. We've started a committee to work with April on this. We did do the survey to the board of directors, our policy committee, and our technical council executive committees. And there will be a survey coming out to members. And that survey that's going out to members is really, really critical. We really want to make sure everybody takes it because, again, this is part of us being inclusive for everybody's different points of views to make sure we go and move forward correctly. So with that, I will get off my soapbox and I'll hand it over to Kobe and you guys can answer questions. But thank you, April. Appreciate it.
You're welcome, Tracy.
Thank you so much. So I just want to start with a very quick reminder that there's a tremendous amount of conversation in the chat, which I love. We're going to be focusing now on the questions and answer section. So click on over to that if you have a question. Also encourage you to upvote questions if there's ones that are already covering the topic you are hoping to cover. And we will go through those questions over the next, say, 15 minutes or so. We really wanted to set aside a good amount of time to have this engaging conversation, and it is meant to be interactive. So we love that we're using these tools not just to present information, and I love that April not just put it into context, but shared some specific recommendations for what we can do to make our organization better. And our hope is that you would take this discussion back with you to your organizations and help to address these issues there. And I'll just cover, because it's relevant to one of our first questions, the elephant in the room. CRRA is absolutely a nonpartisan organization, but we're not an apolitical organization. We have to get into politics because we're set up to share information, to engage with the public sector, with the private sector, and to influence policy. And so that's very much a political function. Racism has influenced all of the structures that we function within, down to the way that we interact within our organizations and how we provide services to our constituents, to our customers. And that's why this topic is so important. So let's start with the first question. How do we bring people along that view the calls for inclusiveness and systemic racism as a political issue instead of a reality? So a great way to start the conversation. Go ahead, April.
Thanks, Kobe. I think that's a really great and important question. First I will just hop back really quick and say, I think it's very interesting to consider race political. I don't, as a Black woman, particularly as a woman, for me, race and being a part of a marginalized group is not political. It's a part of my lived experience. And so, for someone that does not identify as a subgroup or identify as a person of color, it may be harder to really understand, the conversations and the depth connected to our history, connected to our lived experiences, connected to our outcomes, because you don't share that same experience. So I just wanted to highlight that this conversation isn't political. It's become politicized over the last several years. And that's not based on the doing of the advocates on the ground level. And so it's really important to take that away from this presentation, that this is something that's been in existence for over the last 400 years in this country. So again, this isn't something political. This is a part of people's lives and real life experiences. How do you bring someone along that may have some differing views? That's an important question. I think, it's really about, well, I'll just say this. Part of my colleagues in my consulting firm, we often say that we can't change hearts and minds, that we must change systems to enact change. And what we mean by that is oftentimes we have historically in the movement for social justice and racial justice, we have focused explicitly on changing people's minds about how they feel about issues related to race, racism, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we've wasted a lot of time on that. I think what we see is that, there is a growing divide in regards to this conversation, but there also are a lot of people who are joining this conversation because the conversations have been activated within their systems and the organizations that they exist in. And that's where we believe change is going to happen. We believe that when an organization or a system focus explicitly on racial equity, diversity, inclusion, that naturally people want to become a part of that conversation, or they'll choose not to. So I don't spend that much time trying to change people's minds about the realities that are faced by many groups in this country. That's not really my job. My job is to support organizations who are committed to making these shifts. Another piece of this is, through educational opportunities and exposure, that's often another way that people can engage fruitfully in the conversations. But again, that takes commitment. And as I said in the presentation, that takes a willingness and a desire. So hopefully, I've seen in the comments that there were some individuals that had some questions. I'm hoping that those folks stayed through the course of the presentation and hopefully take some things away from this today.
Thanks, April. The second question builds on that discussion a little bit. In relation to systemic racism, social justice, what types of metrics of success should those in the recycling community be looking toward, especially as we reemerge from COVID-19?
That's an incredible question. And I think, part of being responsive is assessing where the industry is. And so I can't give you the answers to that, right? Because I'm not in the waste industry. However, you all are the experts. You all understand what the glaring issues are in relationship to your industry. And so as you're going through such processes and you're relating the issues from COVID-19, the things that you're seeing in your community, and you're connecting those dots explicitly to racial justice and equity, that begins to shape your lens on how you can design the metrics to move your industry and your organization forward. But that takes work. We can't begin to just, kind of pop metrics up. Again, with CRRA, for example, we're going through a strategic process that's beginning with having a survey that went out to members of CRRA staff, board, technical council, and that was all to gather information about where CRRA is at and establish a baseline. And once we do that, we move into the capacity building opportunities. Then we've designed the plan and the metrics and the accountability measures, how CRRA is going to move forward. And so there's a long-term process, and that requires, engagement from all of you, from those who are part of the organization and even closely connected through membership.
We definitely have to do the work. And great segue to the next question. How can we make sure these steps are taken without placing the continued burden on BIPOC communities?
That's a question that we get asked all the time. And I think that a part of our work at Racial Justice Advocates is explicitly talking about working with systems and truly understanding who is running our systems. I have a workshop where I talk candidly about statistics and data around the corporate sector and specifically the nonprofit sector, and looking at the data across the state and even locally here in Sacramento around who is running our nonprofit systems. And overwhelmingly across the state, and even in Sacramento, 70 to 80% of our nonprofits are ran by individuals who identify as white. That naturally leads to glaring inequities, not consciously, right? But oftentimes we hire those who we're in close proximity to. We hire individuals that look like us, right? And so oftentimes those inequities are surfacing within our organizations. So honestly, we talk about the issue of our organizations and our systems being dominated by individuals who identify as white, because that's where our focus has to be. Individuals who identify as white, we've seen that we have more allies and more individuals who are joining this conversation because they understand the need for them to mobilize and activate and support efforts to advance racial justice. And because of their proximity and oftentimes their influence and power within organizations, they have the ability to advance these efforts and support others who have been doing a lot of the heavy lifting for a long time. And so, I've seen a growing amount of individuals who identify as white, who are looking to strengthen their capacities and grow their capacities to support Black, Indigenous, and people of color in this effort. And so I think that's another way that, as I said in the presentation, if we build a multicultural, multi-generational coalition of individuals who are committed to this work and listen to the lived experiences of people who identify as Black, Indigenous, people of color, or other marginalized groups, then we can really advance our work and move the needle forward.
So we have to be willing to have honest conversations and engage with people in what may be difficult conversations. So do you have suggestions about how to have these conversations within our own organizations as we deploy and include racial equity?
Absolutely. I think referencing one of the 5 takeaways from the presentation is establishing community agreements and commitments. And first, of course, CRRA has done the initial step, which is naming this as a strategic and moral imperative for not just the organization and their industry, but their industry as well. And so when you do that, this becomes a constant and consistent part of the conversations every day. And that helps build your capacity and builds your, almost your racial equity muscles, right? And so you become more confident and comfortable in engaging in these conversations the more you have them. But one of the things that's really important that I didn't get a chance to dive into too deeply is the need to establish some sort of parameters and community agreements on how you're going to fruitfully engage in these conversations. That's important for the protection of individuals who identify as Black, Indigenous, or a person of color, other marginalized groups, to feel safe, to feel heard, and to feel validated. And then also giving those who identify as white and our allies the ability to make mistakes, right? Because things are going to be said not in an intentional way, but just through not knowing, right? And so, how are we supporting each other as we're making those mistakes, or how are we making sure that we're actively listening to individuals with lived experiences, or how are we making sure that we're supporting each other throughout these dialogues? So setting those conditions is essentially important. And there are a ton of resources all throughout the internet. However, I have a ton of resources as well that I can share for you to send out to the folks participating in the conference.
That'd be great, thank you. So Laura says, thank you, April, for this valuable presentation. What was the most surprising response to the survey responses? She thought it was strange that some of the percentages were so low.
Well, the percentages, they weren't necessarily low. So for some of those questions, we had about, the survey went out to about 80 people. So we had over 50% of the folks responded to the poll. So there were about 40 plus folks that responded. So when we disaggregate the data per responses, the data will break down per how many people answered that question. So if 43 people answered one question, then 25% of the folks may have said one thing versus 8 who said something different. I think the one thing that was kind of surprising to me in the survey, and as our evaluator was providing me with the report, was that there certainly is a need to talk more candidly about CRRA's vision. And I think I noted that in the presentation. It was clear through the survey that there are varying understandings of where CRRA is in this conversation. And that just speaks to continuity. I think a recommendation that I provided in the presentation was that CRRA certainly should think about establishing some sort of consistent communications around this work that goes out to its membership, maybe via newsletter, or if you send out weekly emails, some sort of progress update on where you all are. Because that can create alignment, that can create shared visioning, and also it keeps others engaged that may not be able to touch the project, but they're engaged and they're able to have a platform to offer their ideas. So I think, just kind of, some of that separation or differing in ideas was probably the most surprising thing that I've seen in the survey.
So I'll combine the next two questions. They're somewhat related. One person asked for more of these tangible examples. How can we get more of these tangible ideas out there so everyday people can take real world action? And then can you provide specific examples of how we can promote transparency and accountability as it relates to diversity, equity, and inclusion? How can we leverage data to force accountability?
I'll start with the first question. So tangible examples are everywhere. I think, as the movement has expanded and has grown and has become more embedded into organizations, there is an array of resources on the internet. Racial Equity Tools is one website, and I can put a resource list together for those who are really interested in exploring some of these websites. Race Forward is another nationally recognized training and capacity building organization that I have the honor of working with. And they do a lot of work across the country around race and organizational development. There are GARE is another, the Government Alliance on Racial Equity, and several others who, have some tangible examples of how this work can be embedded in your organization. I think for the purposes of this presentation, it seems like there's a place for each one of us to start. And I talk very candidly in my presentations and my workshops about how each organization, each person's entry point may be different. You may be at a baseline where you're just wanting to learn more about terminology, or you may be more advanced where you're ready to do the work. And I think as you're coming together as an organization, it's important to understand where we are collectively so that we can move forward together. And then the second question in regards to accountability, I think that's a part of this process, right? So as this process continues to be shaped, a part of holding yourself accountable as an organization by design is having some sort of strategic strategy, such as an action plan, right? So that's the goal with CRRA. So CRRA, again, is going to go through a process where we're collecting information, and all of this information, whether it's through a survey, through listening sessions, through engaging with membership, through capacity building opportunities, all of this is going to inform how we design the action plan. That action plan is going to have specific steps that CRRA can take over time. And again, this isn't a sprint, it's not a marathon, right? It is a relay race. And so some of these metrics and some of these deliverables may not be accomplished in one's tenure. Tracy might be far gone before CRRA is ready to, moves on to a couple of the deliverables. But the important thing to know is that you have a plan. So this becomes almost, similar to a strategic plan. This becomes a part of the organization's DNA. And this is how you ensure that the organization stays steadily focused on racial equity and justice and cultural responsiveness. And so there are outcomes that are attached to this action plan, as well as timelines. And so, through working with CRRA, my team and I will make sure that CRRA holds itself accountable. And once we're out of the picture, they continue this work.
That's great. So we'll do just a couple more questions. The next one is from Colleen. She says, "Thank you, April, for this very important presentation and discussion. Speaking of shared vocabulary, should we be speaking to Black and Brown racial justice, especially in the California landscape?"
Yes, absolutely. I think there was another really great question that I seen around, why do I speak so candidly about Black, Brown, and Indigenous folks? And that's because of the data. The data specifically in California indicates that Black, Brown, and Indigenous people fare worse than our white counterparts across all systems. And that's and also in every industry. So if we're thinking about systems, I'm talking about healthcare systems, in our government systems, in our prison systems, in our nonprofit systems, in our health and human services systems. Across this country, that data doesn't change, it just worsens depending on what region of the country we're in and what resources that region has. So here in California, for us to have be the fifth largest economy in the world, some of these statistics certainly could be reconciled and rectified through strategic investment and also strategic intention. And so, I speak specifically on Black and Indigenous communities because these communities have been grossly impacted by the very systems that we're hoping to impact and change. So yes, we absolutely should have a specific focus on Black, Indigenous, and people and those who identify as Latinx or Hispanic in this country, in California, because of that data. I also, in my day job, outside of having a consulting firm, I'm a policy director for an organization called Public Health Advocates, and I run a campaign that's called California COVID Justice. And so we are exploring and looking at the data across several indicators in regards to how the pandemic has affected Black, Brown, and Indigenous folks, from everything from economically, to housing, to health outcomes, even to death rates. And so, we can't ignore that data. That data is very, very real, and it has been for decades. So when we're thinking about explicitly where our focus should lie, that absolutely is where it should.
There's really no ideal term when we're talking about equity, but it's just a reminder to go back to the data. The data is really going to show those inequities, and COVID has really shown that in incredible ways. The last question, yeah, thank you. So the last question, how do you approach trying to change systems in our organization and dealing with unconscious biases and microaggressions in the workplace?
It's all through education. Again, oftentimes I find that whether consciously or subconsciously, a lot of this can be reconciled through capacity building and educational opportunities. Additionally, when those things don't work, because they're, sometimes we can provide all of the training and capacity building opportunities that we want, that we would like to, and it still has little effectiveness. And so what organizations have to really think about is what is in our policies, or what's happening within our environment that is propagating this sort of behavior, or also tolerating this sort of behavior. Because at some point, once your awareness or your lens has been shaped around these issues, one should be able to address that behavior in real time, right? But if that behavior continues, then the organization has a responsibility to then act, right? And so a part of a long-term strategy of addressing bias unconsciously or subconsciously is having policies in place, policies, procedures, and practices that address those behaviors. Some of you may or may not know this, but the EEOC categorizes, Black, Indigenous people of color as a protected class. However, when it comes to issues of racism within organization, it is extremely nuanced. And so just even speaking to my own experiences, to be very transparent and candid, I've had very, very harmful experiences around racism as a Black woman working in the nonprofit sector, particularly as I got higher up in leadership. And when I would go to my higher ups or even to the HR department, many of my experiences were categorized as issues that could be taken up with a policy, or the individuals who was causing that sort of harm weren't reprimanded because there's no policy in place that says that these behaviors are not okay or not tolerated in the organization. So all that to say, what's happening within the organization that is propagating or allowing this behavior to continue? Well, typically there's an absence of policy. There's an absence of ongoing capacity building opportunities to mitigate these issues. So those are some tangible things that organizations can do to mitigate issues of microaggressions within organizations. They have to speak specifically to them in their policies and procedures.
April, thank you so much for leading this conversation. It's been so engaging. I see so many folks that have even more questions. Your point about the importance of policies and structures and even the culture that all of us are a part of is so helpful. And these tips we can all take back. We can take leadership roles in our organizations to help have these conversations and push for an improvement on the issue of equity and diversity and inclusion. So I particularly want to resonate something that you mentioned in your presentation about the overuse of the term reckoning. That, it's certainly, we've seen some progress, and certainly recognizing a new holiday is important. It helps to get the word out, but it's much more important that we're protecting people's lives, their fundamental rights, their livelihoods, their health, and their safety. In particular on those last issues, that's where our industry has a fundamental role to play to address not just our current system, but inequities from decades ago that have created the system that we're functioning in now. So I again for your presentation. I hope we can take just a very short break to let folks digest this topic, and then in just a minute or two, we're going to shift gears and we're going to welcome The leaders from CPSC and Doug Cobalt, who's their executive director, will have some really amazing awards. So stick around, but I encourage you to take a minute to jot down some notes, think about some questions. We're going to have ways for folks to connect with April and share more information with her. And we will be sending more information to you, including a survey. So look out for that as well. Thanks to everyone that participated in this session.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Kobe.
Thank you. And Doug, we're going to have you jump on in a minute. So I'm seeing in the absolute explosion of the chat box, this was a topic that folks really appreciated and found very useful. And I'm so pleased for everyone that helped to make this happen. So without further ado, I'm excited to introduce Doug Cobalt. I've worked with Doug for many years. He's been very active in CRRA, in CPSC, and in a lot of other organizations that I think most of the 300 folks we have on the line with us have interacted with Doug at some point. He's been a leading proponent for producer response. And we're so happy to have a great partnership between CRRA and CPSC. They're so intertwined with our organization that they're part of our award ceremony. So I'm going to turn it over to Doug to recognize some amazing folks in our industry. Thanks, Doug.
Kobe, thank you very much. I'm so delighted to be here to be able to help present the awards that CPSC gives out each year to recognize businesses and individuals that go beyond to further the movement on extended producer responsibility and product stewardship. And so without further ado, because I know that folks would love to hear who's getting awards, we're going to move into the presentation. So if we can bring the presentation up. And if I can get the rest of staff to join on, I've got our staff members are all joining in.
Yeah, we just need Cameron to join.
Uh-oh, Cameron says she can't join. Sorry for the hiccup, folks. Here she comes. There she is.
Hey!
All right, Cameron, you should be able to share your screen and run the slides. All right. Go ahead and go to full screen if you would, please. There we go. Wonderful. Thank you, Cameron. Okay, cool. This is our 12th annual CRRA Awards for the 2021 year. And so again, we're delighted to be able to recognize businesses and individuals out there that are doing wonderful things. There's so much good stuff going on, and it is really difficult to identify those that are really deserving, because so many of you are more deserving than you ever know. And so, but we try our best to make sure we acknowledge some of the folks that are doing great things. And so with that, let's go to the next slide. So the CRRA Awards are actually a very beautiful plaque that is created by Ellen Blakely, and she does this. And if we can advance to the next slide real quick. She does this, you see it in front of you now. She creates these things by hand, each one of them, and using recycled glass, so glass she either gets, window glass, et cetera, whatever she can find. And then what you see in the background behind the glass is actual materials from her own yard. And so she incorporates the colors that she puts in the background with what is presented in the window of the award. And so I can speak personally. You probably can see one right behind me. I've received one of these awards too, and they are absolutely gorgeous. And so I hope that the recipients treasure these as much as I do and as the past recipients have. So let's go ahead and advance to the next slide. Okay, so the first award is going to be presented by Nate. So Nate, why don't you give us a little background on the Green CRRA Award.
Yeah, good morning. It's great to see so many friendly and familiar faces in the audience today. I'm Nate Pelzar, Special Projects Manager at the California Product Stewardship Council. This morning, I'll be presenting the CPSC Green CRRA Award. The Green CRRA Award is given to an organization that demonstrates an innovative systems approach to removing or reducing toxic or other problematic attributes present in products, and it recognizes system and design innovations. This year's Green Arrow Award goes to Visions Quality Coatings based in Sacramento, California. Visions Quality Coatings recycles and remanufactures paint into new products, including new paint, stepping stones, and other innovative products. Fun fact, Vision's remanufacturing process for leftover paint consumes only 1 gallon of water to make 1 gallon of paint, compared to 13 gallons for each gallon of virgin paint. So significant improvement there. Vision's Quality Coatings is an active participant in California's paint and carpet stewardship programs as a processor, and we appreciate their contributions to these important groups. We're very grateful for Vision's Quality Coatings leadership in the areas of product reuse, circular system design, and innovative product designs. We congratulate you, Vision's Quality Coatings, on a job very well done. Congratulations. Despina, please play the video.
Hello, my name is Jerry Noel, CEO and founder of Visions Recycling, and a proud recipient of this year's CPSC's Green Arrow Award for System and Design Innovation. I would like to thank California Product Stewardship Council and their wonderful staff for all their hard work throughout the years. As Margaret Mead said, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. So thank you to Doug and his wonderful staff at CPSC. Visions Recycling has been moving heavy rocks from one pile to another in the paint recycling industry since 2001. We are pleased to let all of you know that with your help and support, we are now selling premium quality remanufactured latex paint in over 120 stores in 26 states all across the United States. And just recently, we have secured a purchase order from Walmart, which will put Visions in over 300 more stores. Our products are made with the environment in mind. In addition to our quality latex paint, Visions Recycling also has a patented process that enables us to put together sustainable quality cement products, such as decorative stones, aggregates, and parking bumpers. By using leftover paint, wash water, recycled carpet backing, and cement powder, we are very excited about the huge potential this product has in the industry, as the product closely resembles pumice in weight and water absorption. Using at least 3 diverted waste streams into a vital product that will help preserve our natural resources, it is definitely a win-win. It is becoming more and more necessary for all of us to consider the environment when making everyday choices. Water the lawn or a brown lawn. Buy local or have it delivered to your doorstep with extra packaging. This Green Arrow Award is greatly appreciated. Visions will continue its efforts to reuse, recycle, and find alternative uses for other people's trash. Thank you very much.
Again, congratulations to Visions Quality Coatings. Cameron, if you could please reshare.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and move on to the Bow and Arrow Award, which is going to be presented by Joanne.
Thank you. So the Bow and Arrow Award we give every year to an organization or a business who exemplifies outstanding partnerships and collaboration. This year's winner is Conscious Container. Conscious Container is a nonprofit based out of Truckee who does a lot of work with reusable and refillable bottles, especially in the beer and wine industry. They've successfully completed a pilot project with Anheuser-Busch in the San Francisco North Bay area. They've also working closely with Assemblymember Kamlager with the AB 982 legislation to promote reusables within our bottle bill system. Congratulations to Conscious Container, and thank you to Spina for playing the video.
Hello, I'm Karen Mcnamara, founder and CEO of Conscious Container, a California benefit corporation. First, Conscious Container would like to say thank you to the California Product Stewardship Council for considering and awarding us this prestigious Bow and Arrow Award. Taking an idea like building a refillable glass bottle system here in the United States has been a collaborative venture from the start. Starting with craft brewers, municipalities, retailers, and waste hauler partners, we conducted refillable bottle collection pilots. From there, we engaged with glass manufacturers, global and regional beverage producers, legislators, and industry organizations to broaden the narrative and create the platform for this reuse business. And we continue to receive validation with the award of a landmark CalRecycle GHG reuse grant and the successful journey to date of our returnable beverage container legislation right here in California. We are all acutely aware of the impacts of single-use packaging waste, with 75% of glass ending up in landfill across our country. And we know reuse delivers environmental and economic savings, with a refillable glass bottle delivering an 85% lower carbon footprint than a single-use glass bottle. And we all know our take, make, and waste system is unsustainable. Big, bold innovators like Conscious Container are about asking the hard questions and, through collaboration, creating impactful and sustainable, viable business solutions for our most pressing issues. With our landscapes changing so rapidly, we need examples like Conscious Container of how working together cooperatively delivers equitable solutions for the benefit of all. Here we go. Thank you so much.
All right. Congratulations to Conscious Container. Okay, our next award, which is our Infinity Award, will be presented by Cameron.
The Infinity Award is for service and take back. This award recognizes a retail business, group of businesses, or a chain that has initiated an outstanding take back program for one or more products as an additional convenience and service to their customers, and works with producers of those products in developing recovery of end of life of their products. And this award goes to Little Camper. Little Camper is based in Manteca, California. They offer an exchange program for retailers for reusable 1 pound propane cylinders. Their exchange program allows retailers to sell and exchange pre-filled reusable 1 pound propane cylinders, then ship all the empty cylinders back to Little Camper to be refilled. Little Camper worked with Yosemite National Park to switch their stores from single-use to reusables. And they also play an integral part to CPSC's Refill Your Fun and Save campaign. So thank you to Little Camper for creating that closed loop system on this camping essential. And I'll switch it over to Despina.
On behalf of everyone at Little Camper Propane, I want to say thank you to the California Product Stewardship Council for recognizing the work that we've done with the Little Camper Propane program. My name is Josh Simpson, and I want to make sure that we recognize all of the people who have contributed in various ways to the success we've had so far. Whether you're talking about the people at Flame King who brought the 1 pound cylinder that we use into the marketplace in the United States, whether you're talking about the people at Yosemite Hospitality who allowed us access to Yosemite as a market so that we could start getting people who visit one of America's favorite recreational destinations to use a reusable alternative to disposable propane tanks as a way of reducing the amount of hazardous waste that gets left in Yosemite every year. The people at the California Product Stewardship Council, the people who've worked and collaborated on the Refuel Your Fun campaign, the partners that we have at the Yosemite Conservancy, the amazing people at Ace Hardware stores all over California who have gotten on board with our program to offer their customers access to a zero waste and sustainable alternative to disposable propane tanks. California needs to get away from disposable fuel cylinders. The United States needs to get away from disposable fuel cylinders. The Little Camper is a big step towards reaching that goal, and this award is something that we are so grateful for because it just puts a little bit of wind in our sails and allows us to push harder towards our goals. thank you so much for this recognition and expect us to continue on the road we're on. Thank you again.
Congratulations to Little Camper. The product is awesome. Okay, and I get the honor of presenting the kind of overarching award that encompasses the first three you just saw, and that's our Golden Arrow Award. And this award is basically given to an organization that, again, promotes all three of those principles in product stewardship and furthers our product stewardship either through composting, recycling, or others like source reduction. And so their efforts have a lasting impact on the environment, and a positive impact on the environment. We like to recognize them, and they can provide an example for other companies to follow, so that we move further and further away from this disposable society to something that's more circular in nature. And so with that, the Golden Arrow Award winner is Repsco. And so a little bit about Repsco. Repsco is a company that formed here in California, down in Modesto, and they are a provider of what's called slip sheets. And you may never have heard what slip sheets are, but slip sheets are an alternative to wooden pallets. Slip sheets are anywhere between a 10 mil, it's thickness wise, to up to 80 mil, maybe even 100 mil thickness. So you're talking about less than a quarter inch on their thickest one. HDPE, high density polyethylene sheet that slides on, that you put underneath products. And so what this does is it eliminates the thickness of a wood pallet. And so you can actually stack more material, more product in a truck. So you're saving space, and so you're saving GHGs on the trucking. Further, a shipment of slip sheets, they can ship 10,000 of them in a truckload and ship that to a destination. For a truckload of pallets, they can only get 400. So look at how many trucks are being taken off the road in order just to get these product carriers to their destination, where they can then be loaded up and used. And so also, the Repsco company provides a take-back program as well. They actually take back these HDPE slip sheets and grind them up and reuse them again. And by the way, they're using nothing but, it's 100% recycled HDPE. They're not using virgin HDPE. It's all recycled. So from beginning to end, Repsco is doing an awesome job with recycling, source reduction, and also a take-back program. So that's why we were so happy to be able to award Repsco the Golden Arrow Award. So let's go to their video.
Greetings. I'm Paul Bennett, president of Repsco, a manufacturer of plastic slip sheets, reporting live from Modesto, California, to let all our current and future customers in California and know how deeply appreciative Repsco is of the Golden Arrow Award that is presented by the California Product Stewardship Council. It is a big deal. And we appreciate the efforts of the CPSC team that visited our facility in Modesto several months ago to fully understand our manufacturing processes of recycling plastic into plastic slip sheets. Repsco fully supports the goals and the objectives of CPSC in the overall effort to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and also the sustainability globally. We want to acknowledge the tireless work and support of California Finance Department, Jim LaTanner, Bruce Quigley, Karen Gardner. Without them, we would not have been able to make the move from Denver to Modesto. We also want to thank Opportunity Stanislaus, Modesto Chamber of Commerce, Stockton Chamber of Commerce, for all their help in the Green Team activities that they put on each year. Repsco has been manufacturing the slip sheets from 100% high-density polyethylene, post-consumer and post-industrial, from California recyclers since 2011. Slip sheets if you're not familiar with them, are used to replace wood pallets in the shipment of all products, domestic and international. The cost saving is substantial for companies that have made the switch to plastic slip sheets. In closing, we certainly welcome our customers and potential customers to visit our plant. Please contact George Isaac, our sales director, at 303-312-377 or visit us on www.repsco.com. Repsco employees and ownership says thanks to CPSC support and the full recognition of Repsco as a valuable member of the California and global sustainability family. Go green!
And I need to correct myself, because I think I said that they started in California. They actually started in Denver, as you heard, and moved to California. Here is a business that moved from out of state into our state. We keep hearing about all the businesses that want to leave the state. This is what is happening when we are being so innovative here in California to create a recycling infrastructure that's beyond just the MRFs. And we're actually having folks come here and actually produce products here in California. This is exactly what we want to see happen on a regular basis. Okay, we're going to transition now to, we have 2 more awards. Those are congratulations to all 4 of our award winners, our Aero Award winners. We really appreciate everything they're doing for our environment and our economy here in California. Now we're going to transition over to 2 more awards we love to give out every year to recognize, one, our sponsors that sponsor CPSC. We couldn't be doing the work we're doing without our sponsors and also our associates, which I will cover in a minute. But so every year we recognize one of our sponsors for the great work they do. And this year it is the California Waste Haulers Council. California Waste Haulers Council, if you're not familiar with them, is a trade association down in Southern California representing the majority of the Southern California independent operators of hauling companies, material recovery facilities, landfills, etc. You probably know their previous name. They were the Refuse Removal Council of California back in the day, and that was the southern branch, and then we have a northern branch as well, which is now the Resource Recovery Council of California, or Coalition of California. So California Waste Haulers Council has been very active in doing helping out us as an industry to try and make sure that what gets passed in the legislature is reasonable and works for not only themselves, but for the local governments, because a lot of the CRRA membership is local government. And anytime legislation is passed that impacts you or impacts them, guess what? They're going to be having to likely pass those prices down to you, those costs down to you. And so CWHC was very instrumental in 2 bills this year that I thought deserve attention. One is AB 332, which is the treated wood waste bill. They actually were carrying the majority of the work on that bill. That is going to save local governments a lot of money when we get AB 332 to the governor's desk this year for signature. That's going to restore where we were prior to January 1 of this year, and that the treated wood waste materials can be sent back to landfills at a much more reasonable cost. Unfortunately, there are no good alternatives right now for treated wood waste. We need to replace treated wood waste with something that's more environmental. That is going to take time, but in the meantime, I know a lot of you local governments were straining your resources to try and get rid of treated wood waste, or you were having to answer that question on a daily basis of, well, what do I do with my treated wood waste when a constituent calls and you don't have a great answer for them? And that's always a hard thing to do. So we appreciate, and then the other bill was the Lithium-Ion Education Bill, SB 244, that was, I believe, signed into law, and that one will have CalRecycle producing a series of public education campaigns, etc., that you can use as local governments to educate your public on the proper handling and management of lithium-ion batteries, so we can stop the MRF fires and the landfill fires and the truck fires. We need to get a handle on that, and if you're interested in more of that, there is a battery, a lithium-ion and regular battery session on Thursday, so feel free to tune in. And so with that, let's go ahead and advance to the next slide, because we don't have a video for California Waste Haulers Council, but here's a message from Kelly Astor, and I will read it for your, since it's kind of small. I speak for the entire CWHC board and particularly its staff in expressing our sincere thanks for the recognition. Kathy Lynch and I have each witnessed firsthand the development and very positive working relationship between the two organizations, and we firmly believe that the members of both groups derive considerable benefit when we are aligned in addressing the array of challenging policy issues confronting us all. Your organization has exhibited a willingness to consider the waste recycling industry's point of view on several of these issues, much as CWHC has sought to do so with CPSC, and that's from Kelly Astor. He's one of the main folks there at California Waste Top-Hauler Council, along with Kathy Lynch. And so, again, thank you, Kelly, thank you, Kathy, and the rest of the CWHC folks. This is a well-deserved award. Okay, and then finally, our last award of the morning. We always save this one for last. Again, like I mentioned earlier, we cannot be here. We would not exist, CPSC would not exist without our funders. And the lion's share of that does come from our associates, our cities and counties and districts and JPAs up and down the state. We thank you so much for the annual regular contributions you make to keep us afloat here and doing the work we do. And so we love to recognize it, and it's either an associate or an individual within one of the associates or the organization. And this year we are awarding our Associate of the Year award to Courtney Scott. And if you don't know Courtney, I know she's on here somewhere. Most of you probably know Courtney. She is awesome. We have so many great things we could say about Courtney. She's always involved. She's always engaged. She is carrying the message that we need to carry. Her along with Leslie Lucas, who I'm sure you know, one of our former CRRA board members, and Zero Waste Sonoma. The work they do up there, and especially Courtney, I appreciate having her involved on a regular basis here within the Policy and Education Advisory Committee that we have for associates. On the associates calls we have on a regular basis, Courtney is always engaged, bringing in great ideas, and she does a lot for Sonoma. For Sonoma as a whole. Way too many things to mention here, but we just want to congratulate and recognize Courtney for the awesome job that she does. I think we have a video.
Hi everyone. I know a lot of you don't know me because I'm part of the HHW world, but my name is Courtney Scott from Zero Waste Sonoma, and I want to say a huge thank you to the California Product Stewardship Council for naming me the Associate of the Year. It's really a huge honor, and I can't thank you enough, especially after the last year and a half with COVID and things being so difficult. This award really means a lot to me. And if you are interested in learning more about our HHW struggles during COVID, I will be speaking on Thursday afternoon at a panel, so check that out if you're interested. And Zero Waste Sonoma and I have a long history with CPSC, and most recently we completed a 3-year grant together. The grant was for refillable 1-pound propane cylinders, and we set up collection receptacles at campgrounds for disposable propane cylinders, and we also set up relationships with retail locations across the county for the sale, refill, or exchange of the refillable propane cylinders. But aside from programs, I really rely on CPSC for insight on EPR and legislation. And EPR is so important for creating accountability. And hopefully Zero Waste Sonoma will have our own HHW related EPR announcement soon. So keep your fingers crossed for that. And otherwise, I just want to say thank you again to everyone at CPSC. I know there are a lot of really great associates, and I'm just so honored that you chose me to be the Associate of the Year. Thank you.
Congratulations to Courtney. She's done an awesome job, and there are so many of you out there, associates, that are tuning in, and it's so hard for us to pick, but please keep being engaged, keep being out there and involved, and hopefully we will be able to recognize you soon. Unfortunately, we can only do one a year. I want to close this ceremony. Let's go to one more slide, please. I want to congratulate all of our winners. Thank you very much for all of the work that they do, all 6 of these award winners. Again, without them, things would just not be as good. They would not be improving. So, and I want to thank my staff. I have an awesome staff of 3 members that do a lion's share of the work, make myself and the board of CPSC look good. They're tireless and awesome. And thank you, the 3 of you guys, for what you do for us and what you do for me and what you do for the board. And with that, I'm going to close out our award ceremony. One more slide, right? Next year, please send in your nominations. We made the process a lot easier. If you can think of anybody that is following what we've kind of presented here, please let us know. We take nominations. We open it up usually in July, but if you think of someone earlier, just off the top of your head, send that to us, email it to us, and we'll be happy to add them into the mix. And with that, I am going to close the award ceremony. Thank you very much for attending CPSC's 2021 awards.
Thanks, Doug. We always enjoy hearing about all your awards and the amazing work that you guys and all of your awardees are doing. So we appreciate that. Nate and Cameron, thanks as well, and Joanne. Keep up the great work. And also very excited to have Doug Cobalt as our newest board member. So you need to come to the members meeting to hear all about it. So thanks you all. I think at this point, we're gonna move forward and just wanted to thank our sponsors one time again. We couldn't do this conference without you all, so thank you. And then I also, here we go. We're going to do the slideshow. So as mentioned yesterday, our President's Circle, County of San Mateo, Office of Sustainability, Recology, and Rethink Waste. Thank you very, very much. We have our platinum sponsor, which is the City of Santa Monica. Thank you for being such an amazing sponsor. We've got the gold sponsors. Oof, we're flipping through those fast. Gold sponsors, City of Livermore, City of San Diego, City of Vallejo, Mattress Recycling Center, SCS, Stop Waste. Thank you all. Silver sponsors, we've got Alameda County Industries, CARE, Cascadia, City of Fremont, Green Waste, HF&H Consultants, Monterey Regional Waste Management District, PSSI, R3, Republic Services, Resource Recovery Coalition of California, San Francisco Department of the Environment, Tetra Tech, the Recycling Partnership, Waste Management, Zenka Recycling, our bronze sponsors, Athens Services, City of Chula Vista, City of Napa, City of Santa Cruz, Gigantic Idea Studio, Go20, Los Angeles County, Marin Sanitary Service, Mojave Desert and Mountain Recycling, Mount Diablo Resource Recycling, Napa Recycling and Waste Services, Recycle Smart, Salinas Valley Recycles, South San Francisco Scavengers, Specialty Solid Waste, Zero Waste Marin, our friend sponsors, Burtech, California Association of Local Conservation Council, City of Culver City, City of Sunnyvale, Union City Recycles, Zero Waste Sonoma, and then our reciprocal partners who we love as well, California Product Stewardship Council, Californians Against Waste, Container Recycling Institute, Keep California Beautiful, National Stewardship Action Council, SWANA Gold Rush Chapter, and Waste Expo. So with that, thank you once again for all of the sponsors. And just our wrap-up housekeeping. Okay, who did yoga this morning with Ted Ward? Well, the good news is there's multiple times to be able to do yoga with Ted. Today, I think lunchtime there's a session, and then tomorrow as well. So make sure you do yoga with Ted. It's awesome. We have our jobs fair on Wednesday and Thursday morning, so please look at that. If you're looking for a job, there's going to be a lot of people, a lot of businesses there with their HR departments, so please do that. Our members meeting for CRRA is today at 1:45 to 2:45. Okay, so make sure you notice this. You can find it on the HUVA agenda. You just click on it for that. So make sure you go there and you'll meet our newest board members and what CRA has been doing this past year. And of course, the famous Knicker players tonight at 7 p.m. Can't wait. Please look in your email. Okay, this is a big news alert here. Please look in your email for a link for this evening. It's open to everyone, all members, whether you're a participant in the conference or not. So look in your email. Do not go to HUVA. Look in your email for Nickel players tonight. Okay, so to close everything out, the quote of the day for me, we can't change people's hearts and minds, We need to change systems. I think this embodies not just racial justice, but also what we are doing in our industry every single day. So get out there, make some change, and have a great day. See you guys in the sessions.